Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart, distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. Enter our classroom as we discuss the week's news involving Arsenal, Premier League, Champions League, and international football, all from the perspective of a couple of Americans. This week, Arsenal wrapped up our Champions League quarterfinal tie at the Bernabéu against Real Madrid. Did I say Real? I knew to say Real. I may have said it wrong. You know what I mean. In a midweek match. And then traveled to Portman Road and Ipswich in the Premier League. Hello, Keith.
Hi, Dove. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, it was a good week. I got to watch the Champions League match live with family. That was fun, owing to being on vacation. So, yeah. What about you?
Well, you know, there's a saying that 90 minutes is a long time in the Bernabéu, and it's a really long time when it's Arsenal choking the life out of your Champions League campaign. Dude, we won again. We won again. And you want to know the craziest part? Is that it's just how kind of unfrightening it was. It's very easy for me to say now in retrospect. So just I watched bits and pieces of it live. Again, I was at work, so couldn't really watch the whole thing live as it was happening. But so I missed some of the early drama. I came on, it was already 0-0, but I did see the goals in the second half. And when I left, it was 1-1, I think about in the 80th minute. And by that point, I felt pretty good about the result.
Right.
So, yeah, we've done it again. We've played Real Madrid 4 times in the Champions League and have 3 wins and a draw.
Yeah, no, that's amazing.
Against I think they said we are the most games anyone has faced Real Madrid in the Champions League without a loss.
Huh, wow. That's a cool stat. I hadn't heard that one, yeah.
Yeah, which I mean isn't terribly surprising if you think about some of the other, big Champions League teams, obviously Bayern, Barcelona, Liverpool, teams like that. Yeah, I mean they've beaten Real several times, but also Real's obviously beaten them. It is interesting. These are the only 2 times we faced them, and the last one ended with a trip to the finals. Now, we'll talk about that later, but I mean, so you got to. I mean, it really is quite stunning what a night that was.
Yeah,
and really, just as we said, just how comprehensive it was. We were just flat out better than them.
Yeah, basically. One thing I did want to check with you on before we do discuss the match proper in a little bit, but when they talk about this only being the 3rd time that we're going on to the semifinals in the Champions League, do they mean literally in the Champions League, or do they mean in top-level European football going back to before it was called the Champions League? I mean,
we've only ever made it since it's been the Champions League, which the name change came in like 1991, somewhere in there, right around the time. So it's a distinction.
It's a distinction without a difference. We didn't make it before then, anyways, so it doesn't end up affecting the answer.
Well, I mean, they would have just said the Champions League / European Cup, like they would have.
Right.
They would not have. I mean, they wouldn't have made a real distinction. The same way that Madrid's the 15-time winners. Right. Half of those are in the Champions League, half of those are the European. Okay. It's not quite half and half, but
right.
That's not that in this instance isn't a big distinction.
Okay.
Or as I should say, a distinction without difference at this point.
Right. So one thing I wanted to tell you about that was kind of funny. So as I mentioned, I was with family this past week, and we watch a lot of movies. That's one of the things that my family does. And one of the movies that we watched almost as an honorable mention as a potential Gooner U Film Studies movie at some point. It had a lot more soccer in it than I expected, which was Bob Marley, One Love. I didn't realize how much he was into soccer in Jamaica, and they show him playing a bunch in the movie. His kids play. It's kind of a not insignificant part of the movie. It's not just like one shot in a random place. Like there's soccer balls around. He's wearing Adidas stuff. Like it's more of his, like Bob Marley's character than I knew about before. So
yeah, apparently he is a big. I mean, obviously having gone through the Ted Lasso experience and Three Little Birds and its connection to Ajax. I mean, there's he was involved in that. It wasn't just the case of, oh, this sounds cool, so we're going to play it. Like he was in Amsterdam, and so yes, he is well known. He was well known is well known for having been a big fan.
So Ajax,
sport.
they play Three Little Birds at the stadium.
Yeah, so like yeah,
Oh, okay.
so in the Ted Lasso universe, spoiler alert for a show that ended 2 or 3 years ago.
Although I heard another season is actually coming back. Yeah,
apparently, yeah. But yeah, so it's the episode where they go to Amsterdam. They play Ajax in a friendly, and that's everybody kind of goes off and has their own evening in Amsterdam, where Ted invents total football. In Amsterdam, where it was actually invented. But right, that's the one that ends with them all singing Three Little Birds because they hear that in the stadium at the beginning of the episode.
Okay, I think that's what I'd forgotten was that appeared in the stadium earlier. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. In other news, we've had some relegation outcomes transpire over this weekend. You want to update us on that?
Yeah, sure. Quickly. So we've already known Southampton's going down. Mostly because they're challenging Derby County for the worst team ever in the Premier League. It's not a value judgment. That's just in terms of their record. They're horrendous. It's been a bad year for Southampton. Poor Aaron Ramsdale.
Yeah.
But yeah, also today with their loss to Liverpool, Leicester has officially been relegated. They're 1 up and down. We also know apparently Wolves by beating Manchester United in Old Trafford for the second time this year. Wolves has managed to officially clinch their spot in the Premier League for another season. And then we'll talk a little more about them later, but Ipswich Town is almost certainly going to be joining Leicester and Southampton in the Championship next year. It does appear that Burnley and Leeds are the top two in the Championship and seem, I don't think they've clinched it yet, but appear on their way to rejoining the Premier League.
Yeah, I heard that too. Yeah. Yep.
And then, of course, we'll see about
familiar faces coming back. Yeah.
That's usually how it goes, especially the longer you watch. You sort of see the same team. I say the same teams. I think most of the teams in the Championship are teams I recall seeing in the Premier League now, having watched for 20 years. This is my 20th season, actually, as it turns out.
Nice.
So you'll see a lot of those, but Burnley, Leeds, and then I think there was, I don't remember. I remember looking at the standings this morning, and it looked like who was sort of around the playoff spots. It was a couple of recent Premier League teams, but I think also was it Bristol City? There was someone else in there that I was like, oh, they'd be new. So we'll see how that plays. We have still a long way to go in the Championship, but it looks like we are getting to that stage of the season where these things are starting to actually lock into place in terms of where you're going to be next year, both in terms of the league, but also in terms of European competition, which we'll get to down the line.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right, well, let's head to, so first of all, on a pronunciation note, so I know you've said Bernabéu a lot, and I feel like before we actually went there, I heard the commentators also saying Bernabéu, and then once the match happened, and every time they mentioned it thereafter, I'm hearing Bernabéu, which, with the way that it's spelled and where the accent is how I would pronounce that, given no other information.
I've never actually heard a Spanish speaker pronounce it. It's always been English broadcasters. I'll just throw in that during the course of today's game, we're recording on Sunday evening, as we typically do. During some of the Ipswich fans were trying to taunt Arsenal with second again. Apparently the Arsenal fan response was I believe it was to the tune of Ring of Fire. It was Arsenal's in the Bernabéu, Ipswich in the Championship again.
Yeah, that
or Ipswich going down. Ipswich going down again. So I think Bernabéu is the one that just fits better into the songs.
It sounds nice when it's only a few syllables instead of four. Yeah.
So I think that's how I've always done it. I'll be honest, I'm open to being corrected, but I'd be honest, I've never actually heard a Spanish speaker. I should say a Spaniard. I mean, hearing people, in Mexican descent or American.
Being
Spanish
different
speakers.
Dialects,
and which many of which are going to be informed by European commentary, especially English commentary. Even
here. Sure. Well, anyways, didn't want to derail things too much, but I think the first really noteworthy event to mention, well, so on top of the score, I mean, so this is the second leg. We ended up winning 1-2 and 1-5 on aggregate. So as we'll talk about, we unfortunately didn't close them out. We were so close to having them scoreless across both legs, which would have been the cherry on top. But
I mean, it does play a little bit into, and we'll get into this in a moment. I mean, obviously, we should talk a little bit about the build-up. Real Madrid, we've sort of talked about the reputation they carry here, and sort of got like the muscle memory of a club that continues to win at certain moments. And so the line going around, the word going around in Spain, especially in Madrid, was remontada, comeback. Because they have done it on a few occasions before.
Oh, sure.
And it was about building the atmosphere. The Bernabéu has recently was renovated to have a retractable roof, so now it can close, which is not the kind of thing you typically see in European stadiums. That's a
right.
American thing.
That was something I'd made a note about. I haven't seen a stadium with a roof as long as I've been watching Arsenal, so that caught my attention.
I feel like there might be one or two. It's a very European thing to have the seating area covered.
Right.
So the fans are going to be covered, but the field itself will be open. And I'm sure some of that's related to the grass, but also covering the fans. But also, like, Europe doesn't have a place as I said, I live in Houston, where the stadium is indoors because, it was 80 degrees in February here. Like, it's hot.
Right.
So they were closing. They were going to close the roof to keep the noise in. It was gonna be a raucous atmosphere, and it was. I mean, they certainly made a fair amount of noise, and just the most impressive thing is how we just, in so many ways, just completely took that air out of the stadium, which is exactly what you want to do in this kind of game. We talked about how do you tactically approach this kind of game, right? How do you try to play your game? And I think we saw that mostly from Arsenal. I didn't see anything particularly different in the way we played in this game, relative to how we certainly started out in the first leg.
Right.
I didn't
see any strategy shift. No,
we weren't sitting back. And we weren't sitting back. We weren't, going into a shell. We weren't trying to, win 0-0, as it were. We came out to play, and ultimately we were rewarded early on with a penalty.
Yeah, this was an interesting one. So it was not the most interesting one of the night, but so this was Asencio, I believe, committed a penalty for tugging down Marino inside the box.
Yeah, he gives Marino a pretty good pull. I mean, it's not quite a tackle, but it's getting there.
Yeah, so, it was interesting for me seeing the referee go to his pocket and, in addition to giving the penalty, to also make that a yellow card offense, which we've talked about in the past is somewhat rare because generally I think the penalty you've said is looked at as being sufficient enough for most fouls that might occur inside the box.
And also is just the nature of the foul itself. I mean, because what they're calling him for is, essentially a tackle, right? Wrapping him up, which is a yellow card anywhere on the field. You can't do that. Sure. It's not like a case where it's a slide tackle gone wrong or a slide tackle he's missed or sort of bumped him and knocked him over, which is how you typically, a lot of what you see in those instances. I watched a little last night of the Houston Dynamo and the Colorado Rapids, and Colorado got a penalty basically because a Houston defender just threw his shoulder into the attacker. That's that. No, I don't recall if they got a yellow for that, but it was obviously a clear penalty. But in this case, because it's a pull down, and again, I think it's one of those that I think we've seen this in other instances. The referee was clearly looking at it. And because he was looking at it, because we see tugging and pushing and all that stuff all the time on penalty, and corners and set pieces. But because the referee's looking right at it, you say kind of has no choice. It's pretty obvious.
Well, right. So that was interesting, and then we got to Saka's penalty kick. So we're thinking as we were watching this live, okay, well, good. So this is how we begin scoring and ratcheting up and getting ahead even more. And it looked like Odegaard was going to take it at first. Like he and Saka were conferring, and they ended up giving it to Saka. Presumably, to me, that had something to do with him being back after injury for a while, letting him take it, kind of get him back into the swing of things a little bit more, because he has been a little bit rusty. Did you read any of that into it, or?
No, Saka's our primary penalty taker, and we've done that before, where one player goes up to the spot, handles the ball, because the player that goes up to the spot usually takes a lot of verbal abuse. Like it's hard to see because the camera like is zoomed in on his face, right? So you rarely get that. But I mean, the players are shouting at each other, the keeper's making noises, the fans are booing. Like there's a lot of like ambient noise that's coming towards you as the penalty taker. And so you're standing there, you're Odegaard, you're taking it, and then you pass the ball over to Saka. He sets it down. And now at this point, the referee has like pulled everyone back and said, hey, it's time to do this.
Right.
So we've done that before, and they were kind of making comments about it somewhere in the commentary was talking about it, because I watched the full game afterwards later that evening, and the commentary was talking about it. I remember thinking, why? Yeah, we do that. We've done that before. A lot of teams, it's a thing that just sort of teams do now. But yeah, Saka is the primary penalty taker. I'm not surprised at all he took it. I am a little surprised, A, that he tried the Panenka, and B, that it was a horrible one. I mean...
Yeah, so if I'm remembering right, what defines a Panenka is, first of all, that it's like kind of a lob, like a slow speed arcing kick. Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, typically you do it like straight up the middle, so that whichever way the keeper guesses, it goes over him. There's not much he can do about it. And that's where Saka messed up, I think, right? Where it went too far to the side and happened to be in the direction that the keeper went. So he was able to flick a hand up and knock it down, right?
Right. So, yeah, the Panenka is meant to be, is meant to be slow and right down the middle. The comparison point in another sport being baseball, the eephus pitch. Like it's so slow that you can't help but just hack at it. And it relies on the keeper being... his adrenaline pumping, because you see the keeper, you're mostly like the instinct in a penalty is you pick the side, you guess which side you're going to go, and then you go full out that way. Yeah. And so the Panenka is a cheeky little chip in the middle.
Right.
It's an interesting choice. I like the confidence that he has to try and pull that off. Yeah. But it is horribly executed. It was really bad. All right. And there is a danger in that, because, it's easy now to sort of laugh at and say, haha, Real Madrid had no shot this game. That's kind of how it starts. Like, if they had built the comeback, that's the moment it's going to start with, and the change in momentum. So really, I'm more thinking of it in terms of, I think there's a real credit to our response to that even though he misses it, the team's response is essentially just to go, oh well, and just kind of shrug it off and move on and play their and continue to play their game. And so, again, I respect the confidence, but just, oh man, if you're going to do that, you can't miss.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that when it's done right, it embarrasses the keeper and makes him look silly. When it's done wrong, it probably makes the kicker look even more silly than the keeper might have.
Yeah,
but. It wasn't too long before we got our next penalty yellow card combo. So this one was Rice on Mbappe.
Yeah. So anyway, go ahead.
Oh, no, continue.
Well, so the free kick comes. Was it a free kick or a corner? I think it was a free, or was it a free kick following a corner? It wasn't quite a set piece, but anyway, the ball floats in, and you can see Mbappe goes down, and he and Rice are clearly tangled up, at least a little bit tangled up. They call a penalty. They call the card. They card Rice for the same thing that they card Asencio for on the other side, right? He's got his arms around Mbappe. He goes down, right. And then they go to the VAR and they look at it, and then they come back and say, no, that didn't happen.
Well, did they say it didn't happen? What I understood was it was SAOR to the rescue, and because it was an offside play, the whole thing got called back because the whole buildup was called offside. Yeah.
No, and that is a goof on the broadcast where remember it's the single feed, but it did say offside there in the VAR decision.
Yeah.
But they never show the offside. They would have shown the
graphic, right?
The graphic animation.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure where that came from, but I mean, this is one of those. Again, when I turned on after it had already happened, so I knew what happened when I started watching and when I watched it live. That's one of those where the longer it goes on, the more likely it is that they're actually changing the call, which is kind of fun to think about at that stage. But yeah, as you're going through and looking at it, I think the real difference is that Rice doesn't really, he's not actually making the kind of contact you would call for a foul. I mean, you could go back to the previous one we had received, and you could say Marino initiates that contact with Asencio. And I don't think that's unfair. I think Marino does, but he is able to draw the kind of contact that earns him the penalty. I just don't. Yeah, Rice's contact with Mbappe is minimal. And if I kept looking at it, I'm almost wondering if Mbappe goes down, not because of Rice, but because he gets clipped by one of his teammates who's standing right in front of him.
Yeah, for me, I didn't see that. I didn't see any contact between Mbappe and a teammate. But what was interesting is, the more you saw it, it really doesn't look like Rice is exerting any force on him to knock him over. And the prolonged nature of the contact made it clear it was almost Rice holding Mbappe up, keeping him from falling to the ground sooner, not him continuing to push him down or something like that,
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly understand from the referee's perspective calling the penalty, because Rice's arms are sort of under Mbappe's. There's definitely a lot of contact there, and certainly at close glance, and even on some of the replays, I was like, no, that doesn't look good. But the more you watch it, the contact is minimal. Mbappe is kind of going down on his own.
Basically,
and I mean, that's one of those interesting things where we talk about Madrid's black magic in the Bernabéu. They don't get that call. They just don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of interesting in that regard, but I think it was the right decision.
No, I agree. And yeah, of course. But no, I agree. And I think overall it's VAR finally working for us under some circumstances instead of kind of turning a blind eye, which is what it feels like happens so much of the time.
And it was a major save for us because, as we'll talk a little bit more about later, I mean, for Rice, that if that had been a yellow card, he's suspended for the first leg of the semifinal. Right. So that's a huge swing for us, especially considering how the game ultimately plays out.
Yeah, definitely. It was right. There were so many reasons to be relieved when they called it back.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and then finally in the second half, we get the goal.
Yeah, Saka redeems himself within the confines of this match.
I mean, we can joke about it, but at the same time, it says a lot for his confidence that given the opportunity, that's not an easy finish. The chip past Courtois, and he just does it so calmly, and gives a little shush to the crowd.
And his famous, his kind of shrug.
Well,
because
he's borrowing that a little bit from Henry, who did the same thing. He did the same thing when he scored in the Bernabéu. Let them know.
Okay, so the shush was a finger on lips. That was a
that's a quiet now.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. Okay.
I didn't. Oh gosh, I can't remember his name. There was a little dust up at halftime. I cannot for the life of me remember his name. There's as they're going into the locker room, one of the Madrid. He's not one of the. He wasn't playing in the game because he was in street clothes, but I think he might have been one of their players, might have been suspended or injured. But definitely kind of grabs Saka and tries to have a word with him going into the locker room. And so I think that kind of informs a little bit of the reaction there. Like, go ahead, you can talk. Don't talk.
Nice.
Yeah, you talk, I'll score. Here's here's kind of the interesting thing, because we know the away goals rule went away a couple of years ago. Under the away goals rule, the tie's over. If that's the system we're in, not only would we be up by 4 goals in total, but we'd be up 1-0 on away goals, which of course they can't get any of. So they would have to win the game by 4 at that point. They'd have to win. They'd have to score 5. Under the away goals rule, that game's with the tie's over. That's the end of that competition. But because of that, it's not. And it is an interesting little tactical wrinkle that's now it's not over, especially because just a couple minutes later, Vini Jr. gets on the board.
Yeah, so I was embarrassed on Raya's and Saliba's behalf with that one. Especially the whiplash from coming from Saka's goal to within like a couple minutes. Like all of a sudden, it's like, wait, they scored? It went what? We had no idea watching it live. Like what just happened until like they showed the replay, and it may have even taken another replay or two to figure out how things went so badly so quickly. It was like it was a combination of like Raya distributing to Saliba, who had a man on, and he didn't notice, I guess, and Saliba didn't notice either, and so they gave it up to him, and then he's got it in the box, and Raya was in a bad position to defend at that point. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one of those on both of them and the other defenders. Like, someone's got to be yelling at Saliba, man on. Someone's got to be yelling that he's under pressure. And because he clearly doesn't realize how close Vini Jr. is to him. And I mean, again, this is a moment where if there's going to be a comeback, this is how it would start, right? There's a moment where this is the kind of thing, the mistake you can't afford to make, et cetera, et cetera. And again, it is entirely to this team's credit. It's entirely to Arteta's credit for the culture he's created around the team that after that goal, what did Madrid have? They had the same thing they had the whole game. They had the same thing they had in the game in the Emirates. Right. A lot of petulant whining and cheap shotting. I mean, we beat them. We flat out beat that team. I don't want to say broke their spirits, but like they weren't. Whatever level we were on, they weren't. They were not where we were.
No.
And we showed that throughout the night.
Yeah, and so that made it even more frustrating when Partey got himself banned from our first leg in the semifinals. That was very frustrating to watch unfold. What exactly happened there?
So, yeah, because it did happen kind of quick, because I knew it had happened when I went in to watch the replay. That was one of the things that I missed. But I knew it had happened when I was watching the replay. So it's Rüdiger, who, again, had thrown a couple players to the ground. Again, it's kind of surprising he was still on the field, but okay. Rüdiger basically headbutts Marino while they're going for the ball. I mean, Rüdiger looks, he knows what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knew what he was doing when he stepped on Lewis-Skelly. He knew what he was doing when he chucked, was that Timber? He chucked into the goal on a corner at one point. I mean, so he goes and bumps heads with him. He got a yellow for that, and gee, thanks. And then Partey basically comes over and, I mean, there's a part of me that appreciates it because it's the kind of spirit you want. When somebody does that to one of your teammates, you want your guys to be able to step in and say something about it. So for him to pull Rüdiger back and say, and very forcefully make his point to Rüdiger, there is a part of me that almost says worth it, because that's the kind of spirit you want. Unfortunately, and you see as Partey's walking away after having been given the card, Rice is laying into him like, "What are you doing? Stop it." I get it. Like, I get what he's going for, and I can kind of respect it. But yeah, given the circumstances, and again, what are they trying to do? They're lashing out because they're losing. They're trying to get under your skin, and the reason they're trying to get under your skin is because you're already in every other part of them. You're all over. Unless you're Vini Jr., because the only thing you're inside is Timber's pocket. But yeah, I mean, that's just one of those where like it is ultimately frustrating and probably a big loss. And I think that informs a little bit of what we saw today in the Ipswich game in terms of how we were looking at the lineup and some of the things we were trying formation wise, because it will be a bit of a challenge to play Paris Saint-Germain without him, at least for the first leg, which will be at the Emirates, and then we'll have the second leg at the Parc des Princes a little bit later. But we had, before we before we go to Paris, because we'll always have Paris, we had to finish this one off. And yes, 1-1 is a fine result, and we win, and we go through easily. But at this stage, why not just win?
Yeah, Martinelli saw to that. So that was a nice bonus at the end, just to make it official that we really and truly beat them.
Yeah, 2-1. We are unbeaten in the Bernabéu. We've been there twice and with 2 wins, and that's bonkers. And really just kind of sent just an emphatic finish to what was just a fantastic evening. And a well-deserved one, too. I don't think... And Madrid players essentially said the same thing after the first leg, and the Madrid people, even after the second one. Like, 5-1 is reflective of how this went. We were just flat out better than them from beginning to end in both legs. We deserve they are going on. Okay, fine, it's not a vintage Madrid team, blah, blah, blah. We just crushed them.
Yeah.
And what's satisfying about it is almost how routine it felt. Like, I love a good, exciting victory, but there is something to be said for not only taking the lead and then just having the temperament to just finish, to just close it off and just stop it from, like, that was it. We score. I mean, we gave up the goal, but that was it. That was it. There was nothing.
Yeah.
They were throwing crosses into the box. Jude Bellingham's trying to throw Jurrien Timber around, and it just they were beaten and they knew it.
Mm-hmm.
Just fantastic.
Yeah. One other thing you mentioned that I did actually want to talk to you about, but I'd forgotten when we were planning out the show, that Rüdiger step on Miles Lewis-Skelly's stomach, that was some of the worst, most dangerous contact I remember seeing in a soccer match. That looked to me like a red card. Like, stepping on the soft tissue like that. Like, he could have caused internal bleeding or something like that. That was really bad.
And it's a dangerous play. And you could argue, look, guys are tumbling around. He's not trying to step on him. But you've got plenty of people who will tell you, where your feet are going. Like, that's, we're not going to go on and on about the refereeing in general. Obviously, the big call, or, with the penalty being taken away, I think it was the right one. But they were doing, Madrid was doing that thing where they were pushing the limits of the rules and sort of daring the referee to make calls. And overall, I thought he was fine, but it's frustrating when things like that happen. And it's just, and again, we've talked about this throughout the season, right? When you see yellows given for time wasting that lead to red card ejections. And then you see that and nothing. And it's just a very, like, what that again, it kind of gets to the point of what's, are these things we want in the game or not? And it actually sort of will, when we get to Ipswich, we'll talk about this. I'm actually quite happy with how that played out overall. But yeah, it's a frustrating thing to see that happen, to see Rüdiger essentially step on a guy, and he knew what he was. He has to know what he was doing, and it's just a shame that it just kind of happens, and that's just kind of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, as we leave the Bernabéu for at least one season, and we'll see if we return there, what's going on? I guess you were reading that there may be even more European spots than we thought there might be for England coming up.
Well, so yeah, here's where things get a little crazy. So at the start of the season, England is given for the is sets up for having 7 spots in European competition for the following year. So now for 25-26, we can start talking a little bit about 25-26, all things considered. Top 4 go to the Champions League. The 5th place and the FA Cup winner qualifies for Europa League, and then the Carabao Cup winner qualifies for the Conference League. Now, we know the Carabao Cup winner is Newcastle, but Newcastle is going to finish in the top 5. And by the way, we also know that because of England's performance internationally, the Premier League will have a 5th spot in the Champions League.
Right.
Wait, it gets weirder. The winner of the Europa League and the winner of the Champions League both automatically qualify for the Champions League next year. We know our Arsenal's in the semifinals, so they're in the running for that. But also, they feel Arsenal's going to finish in the top 5 in the Premier League. I don't know that it's clinched, but it's going to happen. But you add in, there are 2 English teams in the semifinals of the Europa League in the form of Manchester United and Tottenham, which is amusing, all things considered. But there is also, we should point out, there is a Europa League spot reserved for the Conference League champion, and there is an English team available in the semifinals of the Conference League, and that's Chelsea.
Okay. Right. So
now,
if we sweep all European competitions, and in addition we get those 3 spots basically from each of those, and then we additionally get the ones that we would ordinarily qualify for without any of those European titles. Is that basically it? Plus the 5th Champions League spot. Yeah.
Right. So here's where things get a little squirrely. So I found this article, and it was from ESPN, but it was basically laying out the different permutations potentially, because you have the winners of all these competitions, plus you have the fact that these teams also could qualify on their own based on standings. I mean, think about the teams I've mentioned. Okay, not Spurs and United, but Chelsea and Newcastle are both very much potentially in Champions League spots already. Mm-hmm. And the more that teams are sort of bumped up, there are additional spots sort of added down the line. I think the maximum, they said there's a maximum of, here you go. There is a scenario at the start of the season where 11 Premier League clubs could qualify for Europe next year. Now, that scenario is currently out of the question. That is not going to happen.
Okay.
Because so this is what it would be top 5 in the league, Arsenal as the Champions League winner, but not in the top 5, and United or Tottenham winning the Europa League. Winning the Europa League. Then you would have 6th place, the FA Cup winner, not being Manchester City, who's still alive in that, or probably Aston Villa, maybe Crystal Palace, and Chelsea winning the Conference League, plus Newcastle United not finishing in the top 6, and as a result only qualifying for the conference, not finishing in the top 6. And therefore qualifying for the Conference League as the Carabao Cup winners. It gets crazy.
Right.
There's a realistic maximum of 10, but that involves Newcastle finishing in 7th, which seems unlikely at this stage, and also involves Manchester City not winning the FA Cup, since they're almost certainly going to finish top 5. So it's a little bonkers, the number of permutations that are left, but it does lead. Because we're sort of talking about it, relegation is pretty much set up, right? And the titles, we'll talk about this, almost all but decided. And we're probably going to finish in 2nd. Mm-hmm. But we are going to have... There is still a lot of competition remaining for those European spots. I mean, so this was... Is this today? Hold on, let me make sure I'm looking at the right table. Right now, looking at the table, Newcastle's in 3rd with 59 points. Aston Villa is in 7th with 57. So 3rd to 7th is separated by 2 points.
Right.
And that includes Newcastle, Manchester City, Chelsea, Nottingham Forest, and Aston Villa. Not even considering who is it left. I know Palace and City are still alive in the FA Cup, and I forget who the others are. Anyway, I'm not gonna keep rattling these names off. But the point is, there is a lot to play for in terms of the European spots. And oh, by the way, we do play Newcastle in the next to last game of the season. Yeah. And I do believe we have Bournemouth as well in our remaining. Yeah, we have Bournemouth as well. Those are 2 games left against, 5 Premier League games left. 2 of them are against teams who are going to be desperate for a result. Whereas we may be. It'd be very interesting to see how that plays out, depending on how the Champions League games go. I'll just say that.
Let me make sure I'm understanding this right, though. So let's say we finish number 2 in the Premier League, which is what it's looking like right now. And let's say, optimistically, we win the Champions League. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that a second additional spot opens up to England? Like, we have the winners and we also have 5 spots based on table, or we just qualify twice and a spot goes away for England? Is that it?
So England would only get 5 spots in that instance because we would already have qualified. So that spot will go to some other European country.
Okay. Then
and the other spot, there is a separate spot reserved for the Europa League champion. So at that point, we would have 6, and that's I think a very real possibility.
Yeah,
as Spurs and United, for all of their flaws, are both capable teams. And I'm trying to remember. Hold on, pull up quickly the
right. And neither of those teams is looking like they're going to finish in the top 5 or 6.
Oh no, they're both suffering through some pretty dreadful seasons by their standards. Real quick, let's see. Spurs is going to play old friends Bodø Glimt from Norway.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yep.
Well, Manchester United will face Athletic Bilbao out of Spain, which is a fun one because the San Mamés Bilbao Stadium actually will be the host of the Europa League final. So we'll see how that plays out. There are English teams in the semifinals of all 3 competitions. There are also Spanish teams in the semifinals of all 3 European competitions. So there's a non-zero chance that Spain goes 3 for 3. We know Bilbao is hosting the final. Barcelona is left in the Champions League, and who's the other one? Quickly going to remind myself who was the Europa League. Or the Conference League knockout phase. Scroll down. Chelsea is set to line. Oh, sorry, there we go. Chelsea is going to play Djurgårdens out of Sweden, and then the other one, Real Betis, is the other Spanish team, and they're going to play Fiorentina.
Okay. So that was one question. Is okay. So if we qualify by 2 different routes, it doesn't matter. Like
right, yeah, the spot is
the same result as if we hadn't won the Champions League. Okay,
right.
So then the other question is: so Newcastle won the Carabao Cup. Mm-hmm. If they end up in the top 5, they've qualified then for the Conference League and the Champions League. What happens to their champion or their Conference League spot then?
That will then go to the next team in the standings, which at this point would be, I guess that would be the 6th place team. No, 7th, because the 6th. Well, yeah, no. Yeah, we'll go to the 7th place team because the 6th place team is in the Europa League, including potentially Chelsea, which might also be if they win the Conference League, would then be in the Europa League, but it won't be if they are actually in the Champions League by finishing in the top 5.
So that's interesting. So it doesn't revert to like the runner-up in the Carabao Cup. No. It goes back to the table at that point. Interesting.
It goes back to the table.
Huh. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, speaking of placement and relegation battles and such things, we did play Ipswich earlier today as we record, and we beat them pretty handily. We had a 0-4 victory over at Portman Road, I believe was the name of their stadium. So that was interesting. Have you ever seen us play there or play there in the Premier League before?
Not the Premier League. Ipswich has not been. This is the first time Ipswich has been in the Premier League since I've been watching, which is now 20 years, as we've established earlier this evening, which is wild. This is the first time I've seen Ipswich in the Premier League. They did mention it, and I feel like I vaguely remember it happening. We drew them in, I think, is it the Carabao Cup? Somewhere down or what is the League Cup? What is it now?
Whatever it was called,
whatever it was called at that point. We did draw them at some point in the past, which I vaguely remember. But I remember that it may have happened. I couldn't tell you anything that actually did happen. Apparently, we won, so that's good,
right?
Or at least we won the tie. I don't remember if we won. Yeah, I think they said they actually beat us in Ipswich, but we wound up overwhelming them in the Emirates.
Right. I mean, it was funny to me. One of the reasons I wanted to ask you is, I get the email from Arsenal on match day, although this time I guess the Arsenal women played yesterday, but then the men's match was today, and they sent the email yesterday because they've started consolidating and showing the women's team who they're facing against and us and any week that they're both playing. But anyways, so it was funny. They always show at the bottom, like basically a summary of how many times, like all the competitions like that we've had against that team, and overall how many did we win, how many did we draw, how many did we lose. And I was surprised to see that we've played Ipswich like 60 something times, I think, over the years, which was interesting. They must have been up in the top division more in the past or something.
I think they have. I think they've won the league at some point in the past. And they mentioned during the game they had beaten Arsenal to win an FA Cup, I think in the 70s. I mean, we've played them. Yeah, we have some history against them. I did find it, by the way. Okay. Our semifinal was in the 2010-2011 League Cup. Okay, this is sort of coming back to me. We lost 1-0 at Portman Road in the first leg, and then won 3-0 in the second leg. Here you go. Nicholas Bentner, Laurent Koscielny, and Cesc Fabregas scored the goals. Those are some fun times. Oh, God, yeah, I remember. And then we lost the final to Birmingham City, which you'll have to look up for yourself what actually happened. It was an embarrassing way to concede a late goal to give it up. And this was in a stretch. So the year before I started watching, so in 2005, they beat Manchester United for the FA Cup. And that was the last trophy Arsenal won until they beat Hull City in the 2014 FA Cup. So there was a decade in there where they didn't win anything. And this was about one of the closest we had gotten in that stretch. And given it was Birmingham City, I mean, we had lost the previous League Cup final to Chelsea, which sucks because losing to Chelsea sucks. But like, it wasn't. I mean, we lost to a good Chelsea team, so you can sort of like accept it. But this was a tough loss to a Birmingham City team that wasn't very good. And yeah, I'll let you look that up for yourself. A rather embarrassing way to give up what ended up being the winning goal. So
okay.
Oh man, go back to those days. Anyway,
as the 2010 FA Cup, I'll make a note and put a link in the show notes.
2011 League Cup.
Okay, got it.
I don't remember. Was it Capital One at that point? Anyway, not important. But yeah, so no, this is not the first time I've seen this play. Portman Road. I guess this is not. Well, again, did I watch that semifinal? I don't remember. I've watched a lot of games over the years, but yeah. Although I have to say, though, I recall now that we can talk about it, we played at Portman Road. I don't know how much we can say Ipswich was playing today.
Yeah, I think Raya kind of almost had the day off. He was more in his sweeper keeper role than I think they pointed out like his hands didn't touch the ball to save it. Like I think by the 70th or 80th minute or something.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. I mean, Ipswich has been okay. I mean, for a team that's almost certainly going to be relegated, the general narrative around them, right, is that they played okay, but they've had a lot of late game collapses, which is probably a result of a talent gap between them and some of the rest of the league, but also like just the legs. You know, the intensity of the Premier League is so much more than the Championship, and they're just not. They don't have the depth for it, and so they've. But that's not what we saw today. What we saw today was a team that was just overmatched from the start.
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of legs, it was through one of those players' legs that we scored our first goal.
Mm-hmm. It was a nice finish from Trossard. Both of our first half goals, Trossard, then it was Martinelli. Just beautiful passing, just great. Mm-hmm. We spent the whole first half just carving their defense up and creating opportunities.
Oh yeah,
chance after chance after chance, and then just finally finishing it off with a pair of goals. Yeah, I mean, there's not as much to say. I mean, it feels like there's a little bit more to say about this one than Brentford last week, but still, at that point, we were so dominant, and then they went down to 10 men.
Yeah, so it seemed a pretty uncontroversial red card to everyone except those in the stands at Portman Road who proceeded to boo Saka every time he got the ball, which have you seen that much? Like as someone who is fouled and causes a red card? Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, as much as we love Saka and all that he does and, are outraged at the abuse he takes, his reputation, or, this is, again, how much of this is a real reputation and how much this is just the banter that teams follow, is that Saka is a diver and a whiner. Which is we know is not true, but I'm just telling you what they think. And so he's taking, and so, when they pick up the red card. Now, again, what was the red card for? Well, he scraped his studs down the back of the guy's leg. Mm-hmm. Of course. They were talking about, well, that might be an orange one for me. No, it's not.
I know. I was thinking the same thing.
That's a red. That's a dangerous play. I mean, and I don't think it's dirty. I don't think he's like trying to hurt him. But I mean, as they say, he was trying to, as they say, leave a little on it. Put a little extra so he knows. I'm sorry. I'm sick of that crap. Like, don't do that. That's absolutely a red card. And the only disappointing that we don't see that card given more often, because that you give the card, you're going to stop seeing it. And it's a dangerous play.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have no problem with that. And the fact they kept booing, the only thing that would have made it better is if following the boos, if Saka had converted one of those incredible chances he is able to create.
One of those 4 chances in the span of like under 10 minutes.
Yeah. That would have gotten a shoulder shrug. That would have deserved. I mean, it does say something too. Look at the celebrations we had, even for the early goals. I mean, they were more they were like hugs and handshakes as opposed to know. I get the emotional difference between the stakes involved in that Champions League tie and then an away game against a practically relegated. I mean, it's just. I mean, we saw that a little bit with Brentford, right? Like to last week to try to get up for that game after the emotion and all that happened with Madrid and the Champions League, and then to sort of follow that up with Brentford was like. But here the quality, the gap in quality was just such that we were fine. It didn't matter. We were fine, and we took them apart all game long. And I mean, sure, we got a couple goals in the second half. Trossard twice. He is a really good finisher.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought he played okay in sort of his central forward role. I think today we talk about rotation of the side, but because of the FA Cup, our match against Crystal Palace, who is in the semifinals, is going next weekend. They're playing the FA Cup semifinals, so our match with them was moved from the weekend to Wednesday.
Right. Okay.
Which means, interesting, we get only a three days between the Ipswich and Palace in the league, but then we get a full week off before we play PSG for the first leg of the semifinals.
Yeah, so it works out pretty well for us. Yeah.
And I think some of what you saw today. Because, there weren't a lot of changes in the lineup, right? Mm-hmm. I think what you saw today was a little bit of Arteta sort of working through some things, in particular how we're going to line up without Thomas Partey. It wouldn't surprise me if we play that first leg against PSG with Marino in the midfield and Trossard as a central, more in the central forward role, perhaps. And he might be okay with that if we can get longer runs out of Saka and Martinelli down the wings because they just do so much for you offensively. We've talked about some of the weaknesses Trossard has. I mean, PSG's defenders aren't going to be quite as big as some of what he, big and hulking as some of what he deals with in the Premier League. And I think also that with those wingers, they might draw a little more attention. And so it doesn't have to be the same kind of physical game that we've seen him have some difficulty with. But again, we also have to, deal with Rice. I was interesting because I was kind of watching this game and just saying to myself, I don't really care. I mean, I want us to win, but it's hard to get too amped up for this one. I spent most of the first half watching Martin Odegaard. Just sort of, I decided I was like, I'm going to follow a player around, just sort of watch him for the course of the game. And I picked Odegaard for some reason. I was saying I was going to do it. And even right before kickoff, I'm like, who am I going to do? I guess I'll do Odegaard. It's
a good choice.
He's an interesting player to watch, especially early on, because he gestures a lot. He's pointing. He's clearly giving directions on the field. But also you can see how he's definitely playing. It's interesting how he definitely plays much more in the center of the field in terms of towards the midfield line, and that when the offense is going forward, he's there sort of, he definitely appears as the outlet that everyone funnels to, and then he sort of distributes from there. But you also see that when it's coming out of the back, it's Declan Rice who's been dropping back, and usually Partey does that, but is able to sort of shield the back line and push it forward, where Odegaard seems to have a lot of freedom when the ball goes out to the wing. We know about him on the right side with Saka, but I also saw him a lot drifting out to the left on occasions with Trossard and Martinelli and sort of moving the ball there. Now, some of that was because we saw Zinchenko starting. He drifts into the midfield, and so he's there in the central part of the field where our Odegaard can drift out to the left. So there's a lot of sort of interesting moving parts, and it wouldn't surprise me if you see some of the same things against Paris in about 10 days, next Wednesday. Be interesting to see how they handle that. Also, I expect to see Thomas Partey for 90 minutes on Wednesday against Palace.
Yeah, since we've apparently possibly worked out what our strategy is for PSG today. So we don't need to do that anymore. We can give him a run out again.
Well, I mean, we're going to give him a run out because he's going to play. He's almost certainly going to play 90 because he's not going in the next game. Right. So there's no reason to rest it. Here, I could see them wanting to rest him for rest's sake, but they didn't want to. I would rather he play 90 or he go 75 and then Declan Rice come in for the final 15 just to keep his legs warm, as opposed to like there's no at this point Partey should play. He's a good player. He'll be helpful against a kind of a frisky Palace team, but we should if our it is a weird thing to think about with not having a game on the weekend to have the full week ahead. We could probably play a pretty strong lineup. But I imagine you'll see a little bit of rotation just for the sake of, especially as it gets late on, you might see Saka or Odegaard or players. You might be interested to see who we're worried about in terms of their fitness or just in managing their health, or just, you saw with Saka. I mean, that's kind of the danger. He was down for a little bit after the red card tackle. That's kind of the danger of any of these guys playing, is all of a sudden they're out for a game that is ultimately much more meaningful. It's so weird, right? Like about last year, coming down basically from January onward, like we had to win every single game. Whereas this year, like we're kind of struggling. Like we drew our last 2 games. That sucks.
Well, yeah.
It just, the stakes feel so low because it's juxtaposed with the Champions League where the stakes are so incredibly high. So it's just a fascinating kind of roller coaster compared to last year, which was almost just like a marathon level sprint. Here is a very much more fluctuating. So.
Well, and speaking of player fitness and such matters, I was a little concerned when Saka got his Achilles scraped by the cleats, right? And red card, player sent off. Saka plays a lot of the rest of the match. Nwaneri comes on for him a little bit later on, but he plays the rest of the first half and comes back on, doesn't get subbed off at halftime. But then when he did get subbed off, we saw them strapping this massive bag of ice to the back of his leg with cellophane, like some kind of saran wrap or something like that, right? They're wrapping the biggest ice pack you've ever seen to the back of his leg. And that was concerning. But I did see him come on afterwards, right? Like, did they say anything about him, regarding fitness for the next match?
So this was Arteta's post-game quote. He was a bit sore, but it's nothing serious, so that's good. They did show him walking around the field without the ice pack post-game, doing the handshakes, clapping to the fans and all of that. So I think it was just kept the swelling down, make sure nothing happens, and then he'll go and do that post-game. And obviously, they'll keep an eye on it, but from the sound of it, it hurts, but it should be fine, which is,
Right. Exactly. Sigh of relief. Also, it was fun. We got to see Nathan Butler-Oyedeji. That doesn't quite roll off my tongue yet, but hopefully we start seeing him more. It seemed like he did okay for the little bit that he was on. He had one good attempt. It was a nice shot on target. Was blocked by the keeper, but, was a good effort.
Butler-Oyedeji is a guy who, everything I've heard suggests he has a foot out the door.
Oh, yeah.
But he's just not, he clearly doesn't figure into Arteta's plans. He's been on the bench a few times this year, a few instances where he could have come into the game because we needed a warm body. I mean, think about that stretch where we didn't have any forwards. He is a forward that might have been helpful, and he doesn't get any. He has played in 2 games this year, today, and then he was a late substitute when they played Dinamo Zagreb in the Champions League. Yeah, a game where, it was... What was that, like the end of the group stage, another comprehensive win against an overmatched team? But that might be it as far as. But he'll be the answer to a trivia. He might be the answer to a trivia question someday. Name every. He's the one where you get the name every Arsenal player from the year they won the Champions League, and you'll be like, Butler-Oyedeji, how did I can't remember? Yeah, he'll be that guy.
So as we close out our discussion of Ipswich, let's shift from the relegation battle to the title race, as it were. How are things shaping up? What is the ETA for Liverpool?
So today coming in, there was a scenario where Liverpool would have clinched the title. It involved them beating Leicester and us losing to Ipswich, which that part was always highly unlikely. But Liverpool did beat Leicester, which means their magic number, that is the number of points, the combination of the number of points they need to win and we need to drop, the magic number for the title for them is 3. which means that they will be watching the Palace game with intense interest. If we lose, if Palace wins, Liverpool's won the title.
Yeah.
If we get a result, then Liverpool would win the title with a result on the weekend. The most likely scenario, I think, is that we win against Crystal Palace for reasons we've kind of talked about, at which point Liverpool will have to win to get Liverpool would clinch the title. And as it would turn out, their next game is on the weekend at home against Spurs. So I'll say this. I respect Liverpool as an organization. We've talked about them sort of being a little lucky this year and how things have played out. And I think some of the songs that were being sung, so to speak, about them when they won the title a few years ago, and it's been 30 years. It's so long. They won the Champions League the year before. They're obviously still good. They're winning things. I thought it was a little overwrought, but it is a little. I mean, I understand they're a club that's won so much, and but it had been 30 years since their last title. And it happened during COVID. So they were essentially, had to celebrate it without a stadium with fans, without a real parade, without any of the sort of community you want to build around the club and the team. And so I think it would be, I do think there's something good about them getting to celebrate the title at home, in front of the fans the way they didn't get to a few years ago. So I think there's value in that, and I can appreciate that, and the fact that it'll be against Spurs, which just amuses me. One thing that will likely happen in the aftermath, and I'm not really sure about the protocol entirely. Certainly in the next game they play. So you'll see when the game begins, the two teams walk out next to each other. They stand in the field and then they shake hands and go and play. When a team has clinched the title, it's not written into the rules, but it's a generally accepted practice. You have what they call, an honor guard, or a guard of honor, where the opponents will come out and make two lines, and then the champions will come out, and as they walk through, they'll be applauded by the opposition. I don't know if that's only for the first game they play. It's definitely for the first game they play after they clinch the title. I don't know if it's supposed to take place subsequently. I kind of hope it's not subsequently because we still have to play them. And I think we might be, I'd have to look at their schedule. I think we might be their first home game after Tottenham. And so I'd kind of rather, because I believe they are, hold on, I'll try to vamp a little bit and pull this up. But, because of where they are in the because of where the schedule is and all of that, their next game is not us, but it is an away game. Hold on, oops, this is the wrong one. Where are they? I don't know if the tradition dictates that you do it every time for the rest of the season, or if you just do it for the first game afterwards. Okay, so here's their schedule. They are home against Spurs next Sunday. The next weekend they are at Chelsea, which if things play out the way we expect, Chelsea would be giving them the applause after assuming they beat Tottenham, and Chelsea will applaud them. Their next game is home against us. I don't know that we would have to. It's a petty thing. I don't really want to do it, but you do it out of respect for the opponents. I understand it. It's a good tradition and all of that. And it would be their first home game since then, so I could see the value in it. Or I could see Arteta wanting to do it just out of it's an interesting motivation to watch another team celebrate.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But anyway, yeah, I'm kind of rambling on this point, but it's a kind of thing to keep an eye on. The one that's sort of getting mentioned as of late was 2012. Manchester United won the title in their final year under Sir Alex Ferguson, and their guard of honor was held by Arsenal because their next game was away to Arsenal, which was awkward because their leading scorer that year was Robin van Persie, who had just left Arsenal the year before, and Arsenal fans were we were not happy with how that all played out, and his request as asking to leave and all of that, and basically saying he wanted to go to United of all teams. And even afterwards, he apparently said himself it was just super awkward, and he didn't really enjoy it. Walking out through, being applauded by his former teammates and being booed by the fans. It's not. It can be awkward in some instances, but it's an interesting tradition and one that we haven't seen for a couple of years because City has been so. Like last year, they didn't do it because they clinched on the final day. They needed the win on the last day of the season. So.
We've been giving them a run for their money the last couple times. And
they did have one in the year before because we had been knocked out in May, or it was late in the season when we finally officially fell off. But So with the league season winding down, that is coming up. So something to keep an eye on. I don't know if it'll affect us directly, but something just to keep an eye on.
Sure. On a brighter note, who is your player of the week?
I'm going to say it's Declan Rice. I thought he was magnificent again in the second leg against Madrid, even though it didn't turn into any goals. Who cares? And I thought he was very good in terms of forming the base and starting and pushing the attack, helping to push the attack forward, as well as snuffing out various opportunities. I do want to give a brief shout out as well to Mikel Merino, who continues to demonstrate his versatility. I mean, imagine where our season is if he doesn't get hurt, right when he signs. That's a couple of results we could have turned our way early in the season. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Can't do it. I can't do it. But,
right.
Yeah, but to me, Declan Rice was the best player that I saw this week in both games. Yeah.
That's a good choice. Working my way backwards, so for the Ipswich match, I would look to Saka. Like overall, he looked dangerous, and his first missed attempt late in the first half was his closest, and they kind of drifted further from the goal on his subsequent few, further and further each one. But just to see him in form, like making those shots again, was great. We haven't really seen him on goal taking those types of shots, except also in the Real Madrid match earlier in the week. And I would be giving it to him had he not blown the penalty. Like it's hard for me to call him player of the week, and with that in there, like I can't bring myself to do it. Taking him off a table, for me, it's Odegaard. He created so many chances against Real Madrid. He's, as we saw, as you were talking about following him through Ipswich, just so crucial in moving the ball around the night. Just the ball handling, it's fun for me. I love watching when the players move their feet so nuts when they have the ball without touching the ball, just to throw off the players around them. I saw him do that a couple times, and it just impresses me so much. I love the technical skill that he shows on the field, and it's hard to argue against him in almost any game. But this week I think he was the most consistent for me between the two matches, without himself being a direct goal scorer in either of them. But helping with the build up.
I mean, I do think we've been critical of players like Rice and Odegaard, and we do have to remember, we sort of talked about it coming back from injuries and all of that, and I do think we're starting to see them a little bit closer to what we expect, from both of them as the season comes to the end.
Yeah. What is up for next week?
Right. So as we mentioned, just one game next week. Wednesday, we are home against Crystal Palace. That'll be on USA Network for all of you in the USA. And then it's a week off until the Champions League semifinal, first leg at the Arsenal Stadium in London. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's nice that the semifinal is coming so close so soon after the quarterfinal. There were some pretty big gaps in the Champions League schedule before now, but it's good that we'll have the final result before too long. So
yeah, well, we're running out of weeks.
Fingers crossed.
We're running out of weeks, so you got to put it somewhere.
Yeah, right. Thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube with the link in the show notes. Your homework for today is to comment on one of our videos. Tell us we're great. Tell us we stink. That you agree or disagree. No matter what, we'd love to hear from you. We record the show using Zencastr. If you'd like to try it out, you can support Gooner U by signing up using the link in the description, which also has links to everything we talked about and our social pages. Again, my name is Dove, and you can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
2-1 in the Bernabéu.